Greetings. Welcome to the Captive Desk. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome the James Apperson to the Captive Desk. James, hello.
Yeah, the one and only. Hello, guys. How are you today?
I'm good. I hope you are well too.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm still in the fight, as it were.
That's great. Uh, you may know James as not only one of the greatest speaking voices online, but also as a wonderful interlocutor engaging in a variety of topics from counter apologetics to social issues, or just being a grumpy old man shaking his proverbial fists in the air on numerous channels and on other social media. James also has his own YouTube channel, aptly called James Apperson. And when he's not busy engaging verbally, you may find James writing on his blog and in other commentaries. He not only speaks very well, he writes very well too. You can find his links in the description. James not only has a great speaking voice, he has a great singing voice too. And if you stick around to the end of our chat, we may be able to persuade James to share a bit of his wonderful voice with us. So don't go anywhere. James helped
Sound
me
fun?
review. James helped me review myself in one of my first videos I posted on my channel, and he's been a wonderfully helpful friend before and since as well. Thank you, James. I do appreciate
Oh, thank
it.
you.
Today, though, instead of discussing a video review or an article response to some counter apologetics, a news item, or a debate, or chasing some kids off the lawn, I invited James on to have a talk about James Apperson's perspective on the mysteries of life. So, James, before the swooning, the blogging, and the YouTubing, can you take us all back for a moment and tell us, were you raised in a religious environment? Are you or were you ever religious?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to start the journey, I was raised in a religious environment, but it was an ever-changing religious environment. My mother dedicated to the proposition that somehow there is a God and Bibles are definitely His word. She just wasn't exactly sure how to interpret it and who represented it, and so she would church hop, as if you will. And so, every few months we were in a different religion that was totally the true one. And this went on for quite some time until she ended up in the Jehovah's Witness cult. And that one lasted the longest. And I never really fully bought into it. I never announced an interest in baptism or dedication. I never swore by it. It was just I don't know. I was open to the idea of it, and I was kind of one foot in, one foot out. She eventually did persuade me to the idea that there's a God, and that the Bible is His word, and that I just needed to figure out how to correctly interpret it and live by it. And I held on to that baggage for quite many years. I didn't deconvert until 10 years ago, and so I was never a JW, but I was very religious in my thinking until, like I said, about a decade ago from today.
And so, other friends and family, other than your immediate ones, what was that environment? Were they religious as well? What kind of environment were you in when you were outside of the home?
So growing up, I wasn't allowed to have friends. I couldn't have non JW friends because they were worldly, and I couldn't have JW friends because they were worldly too. There was always some reason why somebody didn't quite make the grade. Maybe they missed meetings sometimes, or they didn't go out in service, or they didn't dress respectfully enough to please Jehovah. There was always some excuse. They heard him listening to rock music one time. Always some reason why this friend and that friend couldn't be a friend. And so, looking back, I recognize now that it was just the way that they were going about isolating me from any potential allies. They were certainly concerned that I might at some point share things about life inside that home that they didn't want people to know about. And they certainly wanted to keep me as unempowered as possible. But at the time, in the context, I didn't understand. I bought all of their excuses. I was this incredibly gullible, overly trusting soul that if somebody told me that you know, the sky is green, then okay, the sky is green. I've just got to figure out how the sky is green. And that's just the way that I grew up. And so I was so sheepified in the way that I made sense of the world and made sense of myself. And as I got into my teenage years, I started to rebel a little bit. I didn't rebel in the way that most people do. I didn't smoke cigarettes or, get a muscle car and peel through the neighborhood. I didn't do drugs. I didn't do any of the usual things. Instead, I simply started to question their wisdom. And that was enough to really, really create a lot of problems in that home. And so I was accused of being this worldly, wayward soul that was a potentially dangerous and maybe even fatal influence on my siblings. And that certainly set the tone for a lot of problems that unfolded from there. So I really went through my formative years without being socialized. I didn't start to really be socialized until, I guess, probably about 10 years ago. And it's interesting because most people, if they interact with me, they say, wow, you're never at a loss for words, you're comfortable around people, you don't mind being put on the spot. And they think that I grew up in this highly socialized environment. And I am, ironically, by nature, an extrovert. But no, no, I grew up having a hard time making sense of myself in the world that I was in and not feeling comfortable in social situations, even though I really wanted to be part of social situations. I wasn't afraid of people. I was simply at a loss for how to understand my place within a sea of people. And so there was this woman that I dated. Um, well, I guess it started about 10 years ago. We were together for almost 3 years. And she was very social. She was a horse trainer and groomer. And so she would train horses how to interact with riders and riders how to relate to their horses. And so we would go to a lot of outings, a lot of special events. And she trained me how to train horses and riders as well. And also, I learned how to give therapeutic massage, and it really helped the riders a lot to be able to relax their muscles and certain muscle groups to be able to ride better. It made um, their connection with their horses more fluid, and so then the horses and the riders were less sore afterwards. And it gave me context. It gave me purpose. I wasn't just a guy at a location where there's other people. I was a guy that had purpose, that had function, that had relevance, and that made it to where people were comfortable around me because, as it turns out, people need context socially in order to have sort of a story where that defines their character versus yours, so they know how to interact with you going forward. They know why you're there. They're not suspicious, right? It's not awkward. And so that was really about 10 years ago when I began to really blossom as a person, to be able to sort of forge, to create, to discover my potential socially and interpersonally. And I discovered a great many things about myself and about other humans in the process. And it was, in that way, the best 3 years of my life. But she was a covert narcissist, and it didn't take long for the gaslighting to begin. And so it was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. And ever since then, even after that breakup, I went through periods where I was highly social and others where I wasn't. Um, I was super, super social between 8 years ago and I would say 5 years ago, for about 3 years on my own. So I would travel the country and I would volunteer at animal rescue ranches, mostly with horses and other large animals, sometimes smaller animals. And every time I would move to a new location in the network, because I was involved with various agencies that did this, where they would help you find people that needed your services. And I would travel a lot around the country in sort of a van life kind of adventure, and I would help riders and help their horses, and I would help them. I mean, I got a chance to work with all kinds of animals. There was llamas and emus and ostriches and camels and you name it. There's so many wonderful animals I had an opportunity to get to know because they each have their own personalities. And in discovering my potential for understanding other people and other animals, I found that that was deepening my understanding of who I am. And I was meeting facets of who I am, developing parts of who I am that I didn't even know existed until then. And it was really a wonderful experience for the most part for a few years. and then moved back to Indiana to give a stable home to my son who has autism, and he just couldn't handle all the moving around. And then COVID hit, and then I started to, isolate and put on weight. Man, huge mistake for me. So as it is, I've done so much research and soul searching and reflection, and gone on so many different adventures on my own, even that I've really blossomed over this last 10 years compared to who I was before. And if you knew me before those 10 years, you wouldn't even recognize me. But moving forward, I'm not religious anymore. I did deconvert about 10 years ago. That's when things really began to change in a good way for me. And so I deconverted in stages. There's no one particular thing that was the whole story or cause of my deconversion. Happened in stages and a series of epiphanies. You realize one thing and then you realize another thing, and it just kind of unfolds. And now looking back, I'm just so glad for the deconversion. But at first, it was difficult because deconversions are difficult. They're painful, they're traumatic, they're upending, and nobody intentionally deconverts from theism. It's just a thing that sometimes happens to you, and we just try to make the best of it.
Now, were you homeschooled, or did you go to public school, private school?
Right. So I did regular school until um, about the end of ninth grade, and then the counselor started to realize that something wasn't right at the home, and then that's when my mom and stepdad pulled me out and started homeschooling me. And then I tolerated that for like a year and a half, and then I went back to public school for about almost a year, and then I finished in homeschool. But that's when I finally left that environment. I left those people behind. So I finished high school on my own after I moved out. So it was a mix, back and forth, back and forth.
When being on your own a lot, did you have hobbies or interests to keep yourself occupied?
So after I set off on my own, I looked up my father, who I hadn't seen since I was probably 10 or 11, I suppose. And so we reconnected and tried to build a relationship, and sometimes it seemed to be working, and sometimes it did not seem to be working. And my dad was like two people. His better self was the most loving, fun, pirate spirited guy you could ever meet. Charismatic and full of life and wonderful sense of humor, and so witty and so confident and talented. But his other self was exactly the opposite of that. It was paranoid and violent, and I could never really make sense of that. And eventually, I just couldn't ride that roller coaster anymore with him. And but for a good time, we were for a year and a half, I guess, we were in each other's lives. And then after that, we were just sort of in each other's lives for several more years. And I went on a lot of trips with him. We went across the country on various road trips for various purposes, family reunions and other festivals and things like that we both liked. And I'm glad that we did go through that. But looking back, I just eventually we just couldn't find a way to get along anymore. And so I went the rest of his life without talking to him, and now I regret that heavily because he died Christmas before last, and I hadn't seen him in decades or spoken with him. And again, I regret that now. I should have found a way to, even if it was only a Christmas card once a year or a visit, that's what I should have done. It's not what I did, and I regret that. But moving forward from there, I tried to stay as busy as I could, but I ended up getting someone pregnant, and when I was, I guess, 21. But before then, I did travel a
So
lot.
you
I
did
was
have
in it.
one. You did have one hobby:
Which hobby?
getting people pregnant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I turned that into a hobby. There you go. So now, before I ended up coming back to Michigan and accidentally getting someone pregnant, I did travel a lot for a while on my own. So I went out to Nevada, and then to Phoenix, Arizona, and then to California. And I just traveled a lot. I was a traveling salesman for a while, so somebody else paid for all my traveling fees. And I didn't do it because I thought it would be great to be a traveling salesman. I just knew that I had that ability where I could speak to people in that way, because I had experience for years trying to sell people Watchtowers and Awake magazines door to door, so it wasn't really all that alien to
Oh,
me.
there you go.
And so I made the best of that, and that went okay. I mean, I don't have any real complaints about that. But I came back to Michigan and settled down with a friend. We became roommates, and then I started dating, and I got some girl pregnant, and then I thought I would do the quote unquote right thing to move in with her and try to take care of her, even though she was mentally very unwell, as it turned out. And so I don't know, mistakes, we all make them. So I don't know. My life isn't strange. There hasn't been any one particular rhythm or rhyme to it. There's not been one particular flow that I would get into. My flows would ebb and change, and sometimes dramatic ways. Um, so that's just, I don't know. I couldn't characterize it as one particular theme or mode for me to be in my life. It just depended on which way the winds were blowing at the time.
And we mentioned that you have a great voice. Did you get your voice from your father?
So yeah, my dad was an amateur Elvis impersonator. Well, semi-amateur, semi-pro. I don't know. He got paid. I couldn't tell you how much he got paid. And
If you making bank, you're doing it.
right, he was making
That's
some
right.
bank. He didn't do it full time, but he did do it. So one of my best early childhood memories was with him, um, dressed in a white high collared outfit with sequins all over it, and so I was the mini him that day, and so we did an opening, we did a show, and it was in uh, Las Vegas, and I think it was the Stardust Hotel, if I remember correctly. But in any event, we did the show, and then afterwards, some pretender came on right after my dad and sang almost as good as my dad in the
Almost.
same song, almost as good as my
Almost.
dad, right? And now, so I'm playing with this girl who's only a couple years older than me, and who's apparently like maybe the daughter of this pretender guy who's pretending to be my dad. And I thought he did okay. It was flattering that somebody would try to be like my dad. I too was trying to be like my dad, and I didn't understand at the time that that was the real Elvis, and that my dad was the pretender. Like that just isn't the way that my brain worked at the time. So I didn't understand the situation in the context that really was happening. But when you're 6 or so years old, I mean, you process things differently. It's just the way that it is. So um, I'm sure I would have made a bigger deal out of it if I would have understood the situation for what it was. But it was fun, and I'm glad to have had that experience. So moving
Was
forward, I mean, go ahead.
was your mother artistic in any way?
My mother did have a good singing voice. So like Karen Carpenter and um, other female vocalists at that time, she imitated those a lot. And um, I don't know that she really had any other artistic ambitions other than that. Um, yeah, she was interesting. I don't know what else to say about her. She was always dedicated to being the best mom and wife that she could be within the context of what she thought those things were supposed to be. Her understanding of those things was quite dysfunctional, and her personality, as it would continue to develop, was troubled to say the least. But in her mind, these were her highest priorities in life: were pleasing her man, being a good mom, and pleasing God. And on the surface, these seems pretty normative, right, for a culture, especially at the time. Looking back, none of that was real. I mean, these are all roles that she played in order to feel good about herself, to crouch her identity in a narrative that felt empowering, that felt reassuring and validating. So, and I don't begrudge her that, because these are normal human impulses to crouch ourselves in stories that give us identity and power and stability and reassurance and things like that. Yeah, generally speaking, those things make sense. She took them to extremes because she didn't know who she was, and she wasn't courageous enough to sort it out for herself. She needed somebody else to tell her who she was at all times.
What about other siblings or cousins or anything? Did you have interactions with any other family members that were kids and also in the religion?
So, not that most of them weren't in the religion. The only exception was my grandfather's brother was a JW, and he got disfellowshipped. So I went from being able to hang out with his kids, which were my cousins and his family, to I'm not even allowed to say hi to that uncle at family gatherings. So he would come in and try to be part of some kind of family event, like Mother's Day or whatever thing they were gathering for at their mom's house. So like my grandmother, great grandmother, and I wasn't allowed to say hi to him because he'd been disfellowshipped, and that really was the beginning of the end for that relationship with those cousins too. Because at that point, those cousins felt like, if you're not going to say hi to my dad, then you don't need to say hi to us either. And that's reasonable. It is. But at the time, I was just doing what I was told because I was in a cult. And what are you going to do? Um, and then we did go to my grandparents' house a lot, my mother's parents. And every time we'd go there, I was so looking forward to being able to spend time with them. But instead, we kids were banished to the basement so that they, adults, could sit at the table and argue about whose Bible was better, whose understanding of the Bible was better, whose God was really approving of them, and whose God was imaginary. And they would just argue about everything, hellfire and Trinity and everything that the JWs obsess about. And it was so ugly the way they would posture and the way that they would sneer and the way that they just feel like they were one-upping each other the whole time and haha, what about this verse? And it was so ugly. And it denied us children, us grandchildren, the opportunity to really develop a bond and and just to be seen and heard by our grandparents. And part of the problem was that old school way of thinking, because they would actually say children are meant to be seen and not heard, right? That you I'm sure you've heard those kinds of
Kid,
statements before.
the kids sit at the little table, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So there was a lot of disregard, disrespect, devaluation. Until you're an adult, you don't even count. You only exist at their pleasure, right? And they don't want to be troubled with you. And so it's not like my grandparents were looking for an opportunity to really connect with and get to know us grandkids because they weren't. But there were still opportunities there where they would have, and those were robbed from everybody because of their mutual fixations with trying to be, the true Christians and denounce the heretics.
Now, in any of your doubts that crept in, I know you had many facets to it and everything, but did you ever consider any other religions? Did that entertain or go to any other temples or mosques or anything looking around?
So once they finally ended up on the JWs, and I was just kind of drug along through the process, they gradually did indoctrinate me with some success as time went on. So when I left that environment, even though I wasn't a JW, nor did I want to become a JW, I was still biased in terms of doctrines. And so when I'd read a particular Bible verse or whatever, I would read it through a JW lens, whether I knew it or didn't know it. And when I'd go to a friend, and I went to a few different churches with friends, and I interpreted everything through the lens that I'd been indoctrinated into. So all the biases that come with that, and so it was never going to work anyways. And but at the same time, I didn't really want to be a JW. I saw the way that they treated each other. I didn't like the authoritarian vibe. Um, and even though they claimed to be pacifists, they were impressively violent for pacifists. They were quite brutal in the way that they spoke and treated each other. And to be honest, I just couldn't agree with that at all. So, growing up, I was told that the reason that God didn't hear my prayers, because I could tell I was talking to myself. Growing up, even as a teenager, I would pray, and I could tell nobody was hearing my prayers. I knew I was just talking to myself. But my mother's explanation for that, and I bought it, was that because I'm not obedient enough in order to please them, it meant that I was not obedient enough in order to please God. Therefore, God found me unworthy to hear my prayers. And so it didn't matter what I was going to say to God until I got right with God by sufficiently pleasing my mom and stepdad with sufficiently perfect obedience and perfect disposition at all times and all things. God was never going to listen to my prayers. So I was saddled with this idea that, there is a creator of the universe. He wants a personal relationship with me, but I'm too much of a shit loser to have a relationship with me only because I'm not obedient and unquestioning enough. And so I was just straddled with that whole thing where I felt like less of a person than most of the people in the world. And I had to contend with that for a great many years until I finally deconverted.
Now, officially, do you call yourself an atheist?
It depends on the context. There are some contexts. Do I need to bring the microphone closer? I've had it.
You
I've got
sound
it.
all right. You sound all right.
All right. I thought I would give people a special treat today by keeping the microphone at least 6 inches further away from me than I normally do, so that people don't have to listen to every breath I take in between
No,
sentences.
you sound fine. It sounded fine to
All
me
right.
here.
Because
So
usually when I go back to listen to my own streams, a lot of times what stands out to me is just how much of my own breathing I have to listen to. And then I think about all the people who charitably listen to my whole stream, and I'm like, oh, those poor people, they shouldn't have to listen to that. So I thought, I'm going to try this
when I
thing.
do my own videos, yeah, I get my face all up, and I'm doing everything in my computer, and yeah, then
Yeah,
I'm breathing right into my microphone.
right, right.
gotta gotta put it over here a little bit.
Right, exactly. Um, Ask me that last question again. I'm sorry.
Are you an atheist?
Right. So the answer that I give depends on the context of the conversation I'm having at the time. It's difficult for me because the relationship that I have with words does change over time as I think more about those relationships. And so, for example, what it means to be an atheist, the theist part of that word refers to a god, right? So if you're an atheist, you either aren't convinced that a god exists, or depending on definition, you're taking the stand that for sure no gods exist. The problem with that I've developed recently is, what the hell is a god? Because if there's no real objective or universal standard of what that word means, then that means that the word atheist doesn't necessarily automatically mean anything either, right? Because it can't be a stable meaning or word if the God that it refers to is not really described. It's not really defined. And so I like, yeah, I'm an atheist in a cultural context. So if a Christian asks me if I'm an atheist, the answer is yeah. It's easy enough, right? But if a pantheist asks me if I'm an atheist, then it gets a little bit more complicated. This is how I look at it, and I think I've probably said this before, but uh, a god is a relationship paradigm. It means, generally speaking, it means that somebody is so impressed, they are so awestruck, they are so humbled, metaphorically at the feet of some construct, some actually existing thing, or a mental existing thing. Either way, something that they regard as real, something that they regard as so powerful and awe inspiring that they are humbled at the feet of it, to where they subject themselves to it and can see no meaningful fault in whatever it is that they're reverent towards. Now, this doesn't apply to all definitions of God. This is part of the problem. But in a cultural context, the answer is yeah, I'm an atheist because I look around and I'm not impressed, not sufficiently impressed. There's too much suffering in the world. There's too much junk in our DNA. There's too much confusion and problems in the world. The universe is this big hostile vacuum of flying debris and deadly radiation and no oxygen to speak of except here. So the idea that this universe was created by this benevolent super entity seems preposterous to me personally. So if somebody were to convince me through some argumentation that surely there must be a super being who designed all this stuff, even if they could convince me of that, I still wouldn't call it a god because I'm not impressed by the work, right? And this is like what Epicurus was talking about. If you have an entity, whether it's real or not, proposed idea of an entity is that it's all knowing, all powerful, all wise, all loving. But then how can evil possibly exist in a world created by such an entity? If he doesn't want to prevent all that suffering, then he's an asshole, right? And why would you call an asshole a god? Why would you worship an asshole? If he does want to fix all this stuff, then he must not be able to. Very limited power. And if they have that limited power, why then are you calling that a god? Right? It's just like, it just doesn't work. The idea just doesn't work. Now, if somebody wants to be so impressed that they have this religious language and these religious ideas and this romanticized idea about something, and they want to worship at the feet of it. I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me, right? Pantheists do that. Pantheism is just basically sexed up atheism. It's just people who are so impressed by the universe and by nature that they basically worship at the feet of it. Maybe not in a literal sense, but in an emotional sense. And I'm okay with that if they're that impressed. Mike, my good friend from Answers in Atheism, he's that impressed with the world, with nature. He's in love with it. And I wouldn't begrudge him that, right? He's entitled to it. It doesn't hurt me at all that he's that much in love with, how things are. I'm just not. And so he doesn't use the word God, but he could, because that's just pantheism, right? And he just doesn't, because he doesn't want to use that religious language to describe something that isn't religious. I don't know. It's a complicated issue for me, but for me, once we sort out through all the tangled mess of associated controversies, at the at the end of the day, I just don't think that there is a super being that created the universe. And even if there is, I think he's a big jerk and a psychopath, and I don't necessarily want to know, let alone worship him. Like, why would I want to? But if some giant Jesus showed up surfing the waves of the clouds someday, and this big giant surfboard, and came down and said, you either decide to be on my team or I'm going to horrifically destroy you or torture you forever. I'll admit I'd probably be like, go Jesus, go Jesus, go. Because I don't want to get horrifically destroyed and tortured forever. I don't want
Right.
that. But if it was other than that, I'm just not interested in the whole proposition. Because even if there's a super being out there, I just feel like that's not my problem. It's just not.
Yeah, the old, do you want some chocolate cake or do you want some broken glass? And it's like, well, I'll take the chocolate cake, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. So, and then with all the years, then everything, did you ever have a religious experience, or did you think you had a religious experience?
I never had a positive religious experience. I only ever had negative ones, and this could be part of what led to my deconversion subconsciously, because there was only, if you think about it, Satan, in the context of Christian mythology, gets credit for all the good shit, right? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Anything that's pleasurable, anything that's liberating, that's Satan. And anything that's enslaving, and anything that demands, that has irrational demands for obedience and for restriction and for self disownment, and for suffering in the name of his glory. That's all God stuff. And I'm like, well, Satan kind of looks like the good guy from there. Um, did I really have any religious experiences? No. I had some experiences that seemed supernatural at the time, because they defied any available scientific explanation. Now, those experiences did happen, and they do defy available scientific explanation. But I think that speaks more to how much we don't know about science, about the way that our minds work and the way that the physics of the universe works. And so, whenever I have an experience that science just has no explanation for, I no longer go to the magical thinking of supernaturalism. Instead, I just say, here's another experience I can't explain. Who knows? Surely there's a physical explanation for it. I just don't know what it is.
I've always had that thought too, where it's something that's unknown, and yeah, that's what the first thing that comes into my mind is, I hope some genius out there figures it out because it's got me curious.
Right.
I hope somebody figures that out. Yeah, right. And then you
Yep.
wait for the answer. And so yeah, in the environment I was raised, I just always assumed that's how you did it. There was a question, and then obviously not everybody's equipped to answer it, but generally there's experts out there that dedicate their lives to solving this question for us, and I appreciate it.
Right. Yep. So do I. Absolutely.
Now, you've spoken before about wanting to sail away. Would that have something to do with wanting to just sail away from it all?
So, in the global scheme of things, my research indicates that there is always a few great places to live, and that changes every year. The list of the best and worst places changes every year, for the most part. I mean, there are some places that are always near the top of the list. There are some places that are always near the bottom of the list. At the bottom would be places like North Korea, right? Currently Russia. And at the top, generally like the Scandinavian, or what you might call Norwegian countries, um, tend to be at the top. So it just depends. Like a few years ago, the list would have been different than it is now. I'm trying to think about um, where I'd want to go. Currently, I'm just not sure. Not here. America is such a mess right now, as most everybody knows, and it's heartbreaking what happens in the political arena and what happens, just how divided people are right now. And I totally understand people that want to stand and fight to make it a better country, to make it a better place for everybody. I get that. Um, but lately, I've been kind of giving myself permission to be more selfish, because historically, I was a people pleaser who always wanted to put everybody else first and carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. And as I get older, and I realize, especially in the face of some health issues that I've had the last year or so, when I look at my life in context, I realized that I was much too altruistic, not selfish enough. And I realized that balance is hard to find. But I would like to give myself permission to go a couple of years being pretty damn selfish, and then just to take care of me, to heal, and to just get my head on right, and then just, you know, reap the benefits of being selfish in this world. And then once I get to a certain level of good health and function, then to start to take the excess. And honestly, I recommend this for everybody. Be selfish until you have excess, and then allocate that excess to the interests of other people. I think, in my personal opinion, that's the best way to be, period, for everybody. Um, and somebody wants to disagree with me, they can. It's fine. It's just how I feel about it, right? It's not. I'm not trying to state some objective fact of the universe. So, uh, my desire to sail away is a desire to go and be healthy and be happy and be safe for a while, and to nurture myself back into the state that I need to be in, so that then I can take the excess I build from there and then allocate that excess out to other people.
Well, we're about halfway through. I told James we would talk for about an hour. So I want to stop for a minute and say hi to everybody that's joined us in the chat. Looks like Pragmatic Crystal's here. Sandals is here. They both say they're atheists. And
I think
Class
pragmatic
is here.
atheist.
I hope everything's going well there with the motor issues down there in the bayou. And
What's
Class is
happening?
had a problem with the boat motor, I believe.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Classes said, I didn't know James sang. You didn't know James sang? He sang before a couple times. You gotta catch the right streams.
You got to catch him. No, I don't normally.
That's why you have to stay tuned. You always have to stay tuned, because you never know if James might break out in a song.
You never know. Now, I don't sing often, not even in my own space. In fact, I don't even sing in the showers. And because both my parents were great at singing, and because sometimes I myself am good at singing, not always, I am sometimes, I really should practice more, because it is a rare and special ability. I know why the caged bird sings, and that's just not where I'm at in my journey. So I just, the song isn't there to sing in my heart. And this is part of the reason why I've given myself permission to start being selfish, so that I can start again to feel the urge to sing, and then I can bring that into reality.
I hope so. That would be wonderful.
I hope so too.
It's a gift to share. And Sandals with those dang kids. Yeah, that's why I put up a fence, so I ain't got nobody on my grass.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Scott Duke, always a pleasure, sir. And everybody's saying hi and hello. I think that's everybody in there.
Awesome. Yeah, I see a lot of my favorite people in there.
Let's see. Blessed be he is rolling through. Thanks for stopping by. All right, James. So we have to know
Mm-hmm.
one of the great mysteries of life that you came here to share. What is a flea beard?
Fleabeard. So many years ago, when I started the channel, I was playing games with my kids online, and they were playing World of Warcraft, and I made this dwarven hunter character, and I named him Fleabeard. So when I originally created the YouTube channel, I was just going to stream while I was playing games with my kids. Um, but we didn't stay with that game long enough really to turn that into it. So my channel just sat there, really just being unused for any platforming. And then I never thought about it one way or the other. I forgot that I had named it Fleabeard. And then this last year, after I started my channel, somebody asked me, "How come you're naming a channel for counter apologetics Fleabeard?" And because it seemed like that was the point of my channel, was counter apologetics, and that wasn't really the intended purpose of my channel. It just kind of happened that way. But I had forgotten. I'm like, oh wait, it's still named Fleabeard. I forgot, right? So it was just incidental and accidental. It doesn't have a really deep meaning. It was just that. And I would love to find a new name for the channel, but the challenge then has been to pick a name that meets the theme, and I don't have a theme picked out for the channel still, because originally this last year when I started broadcasting on this YouTube channel that I have, it was just meant to be an open bar, metaphorically speaking, for people that know each other in the web of interconnected channels, that see each other regularly in chat, for example. Just another place for people to hang out when there was nobody else streaming. And beyond that, to give people voice. There are some people who either have speech impediments, or they're just very shy, or they're too busy, right? They're working, or they're working out, or they're chasing kids around the house. They're not available to give their voice to a stream. So maybe they'll just type some stuff in chat now and then. And so the idea for my channel became, well, I could give them voice by reading the comments, right? That way, people that aren't at their computer, they're working out, or they're chasing kids around the house, or whatever, or they're folding laundry, they can know what's being said in chat because I'm reading the chat. And in that way, everybody that's in the chat is part of the show, is a part of this social happening, right? And then in the context of that, let's just talk about issues people care about. And I always tell people, what do you care about? Because that's the stuff we can talk about. And most of the people that were in the chat at my channel were there because we had met in counter apologetic channels. People talking about atheism versus religion, and deconversion stories, and people that have an interest in uh, Christian religious history because they want to understand how that whole thing starts, and you know, because it helps them make sense of the religion that they become disillusioned with, and it helps them have difficult conversations with friends and family. And so these are the issues people cared about, and so these are the issues we talked about, and it gradually became more political as political interests began to capture people's lives, capture their attention, and create problems in that they were engaged with. And so we'd begin to talk about that. And the problem with talking about politics is it's dangerous, right? Because if you're talking about a really polarizing, charging issue that really has a dramatic impact on other people's lives, then the more important the issue and the deeper you dive into it, the more of a standard you'll be held to in terms of using your words exactly the right way so as not to upset anybody. And as I started to go further and further down that rabbit hole, I started to realize that there were responsibilities that came with that were heavier than the weight that I meant to burden, that I had ever intended to take onto myself. And people started getting upset with me because sometimes I wouldn't use exactly the right word, exactly the right way. Maybe the tone of voice, maybe the exact word I would use. And I thought, okay, I get their point. But at that point, I felt like I was damned if I do and damned if I don't. And I just felt like, you know what? Leave that to somebody more qualified. somebody who is more careful with their words, somebody who is more informed about the intricacies of the culture world than I am. And that's when I decided to go ahead and back off from all the political, um, controversial content. And then I had to decide what am I going to do instead with my channel. And the reason I haven't streamed very much since I came to that realization was I'm not exactly sure what I want to do with the channel. At the time, I was using words like community. We have a community that I was helping build. And for various reasons, it occurred to me that this is a very nebulous term, that it's not well defined at all. It's so nebulous, it's not particularly meaningful. And I just didn't want the responsibility for speaking for other people. It was never my intention. I would have wanted to help people find their own voice and to add my voice to theirs and to bring their voice um, into a heard state via reading their comments out loud in streams. I never intended to take on the mantle of responsibility for speaking for anybody else. And so moving forward, I'm not really sure what I am going to do with that channel. Um, Recently, I've only done a little bit of counter apologetics. Most of the issues that I've talked about have been philosophy and basically emotional support and inspiration for different ways to look at things. I don't know if you caught the stream I did several days ago where I talked about my ancestor spirits and how I worship them. I don't know if you caught that stream or not.
Yep.
So, people generally responded well to that. They were glad for the new direction. I know a lot of people tuned in just to see if I'd say some crazy, stupid stuff about the supernatural realm. They thought I was going to be literal, and I knew that they would probably think that. But I wasn't. For the most part, I wasn't literal. It was metaphorical. It was just ways to develop a narrative where we can have a different kind of relationship with our journey that can be empowering and healing.
And by the way, speaking of, trying to find a name for your channel is not easy.
No.
I struggled and struggled until I just kind of stumbled on Captive Desk, and it just hit me like, yes, that's it. And so it stuck. So I understand the struggle.
Yeah, that's where I'm at about it. And it'll be easier once I think it'll be easier once I pick a theme or a direction for the channel that I can hold to so that people know what to expect. I just haven't sorted that out yet. I'm still preferential to the idea of focusing most of my energies moving forward to a second channel where I just read things. But I haven't officially began that yet. I've made some recordings. I need some new equipment, as it turns out, before I can do it properly. So that's kind of on pause while I work through that. But in the meantime, there still is a great many people who I look forward to seeing out there in the webiverse, right, at various channels. When I see these people, Melody Joy and Scott Duke and Sandals and Coliseum 789, Pragmatic Crystal, going back up. I mean, there's just so many people. I love it when I see them, whether it's at my channel or somebody else's channel. It's all the same to me. I don't care where I see them, and I just love seeing them.
Right.
I love, it's wonderful to have people that you slowly get to know, and sometimes they're so damn clever and funny and witty, and sometimes they're
and what their sock accounts are.
Sometimes you can tell who's who. Sometimes you can tell. So I need to make some sock accounts myself. I think that could be fun. So
well, then you already covered my next question, so then I'll skip that one and I'll go to, with all the discussions you've had, can you name some ones that stand out as really great or really bad discussions, and how would you have changed it?
So it's ironic that I'm most tempted to talk about the conversations I've hated. However, I can't do that without calling specific people out. It's a catch-22. I can't do it. And people have rightly expressed concerns about that from anybody out here, because, when you call somebody out and that person's interpersonally connected with this network of people, then people are going to feel like they got to pick sides, right? And I don't want people to feel like I'm picking on somebody they like, or that they now have to choose loyalties, or that I'm feeding negativity into the social stream.
We have
And
to critique ourselves.
we have to critique
We
ourselves.
have to critique ourselves. We have to keep critiquing ourselves if we're going to critique the believers or anything else that we cover.
Right. And I do, like, I'll critique myself. There's any number of mistakes that I've made in the past year that, what was I thinking when I made those mistakes? I couldn't even tell you. Like, dude, like, yeah, I'm pretty hard on myself. I really am. And sometimes other people are hard on me, but either way, it's fine. Like, I don't take it personally. Sometimes they're right. Um, as far as some of the better conversations that I've had, ironically, some of the best conversations I've had were with Jay, even though we're not friends anymore, right? Some of the best,
Well,
some of the funnest moments I've had were with Jay. Some of the most thought-provoking moments I've had were with Jay, and I regret, honestly, I regret that I called him out on my channel. I stand behind what I said, but I still should have said it to him privately. That was on me. One of the many stupid mistakes I've made over this past year. And I could have handled it so much better. I wasn't planning on. I blew up, and I shouldn't have. About once a year, I blow up with somebody. The year before that, it was Stephanie Tretton. The year before that, it was somebody else. Right? It's just once a year, I blow up with somebody, and I guess it was Jay's turn. Um, but as far as who else that I've had great conversations with, I don't know. I mean, there have been times where I had great conversations with Mark Reed. I do not like the last conversation I had with him. Um, but I have had some great conversations with him. Um, Richard Madsen, I don't think he and I will be having any more discussions in the future, but there was at least one or two good conversations I had with him, and so I don't know. I mean, I think the best conversations I've had, ironically, have been off the record, where people have privately called me through Discord or through Facebook, and we've talked for an hour. And at the end of that conversation, I'll be like, "Damn it, we should have been streaming this. This was brilliant. This whole damn conversation was brilliant." But it's
yeah.
too late now. You can't have the same conversation twice, so it's gone, right? So that's been probably my biggest frustration.
Well, then you were already covering. You're not sure about the other channel, then. No timeline yet, or are you still just in the early stages?
Oh, the other channel is just a matter of getting the new equipment, honestly, because this microphone is not suitable enough for the purpose I thought it would be, and it's not for various reasons. And sometimes even the computer itself lets me down, which I can get through that. Like, I'll just, if I got to record something twice, I just do. The microphone's a bigger issue, so I'll be getting a new microphone and then making some new recordings. And as soon as I'm content with the quality of the recordings I'm making, then I'll start releasing them. Um, so I'm going to have two different things going on with that. I'm going to, with permission from authors and publishers that gave me permission, I will record their books. But I don't know how much of that's going to make it onto my channel and how much of it's going to make it into Audible over on Amazon, because it just depends on where they want it. Um, I will be recording some public domain stuff that I don't need any permissions for. That stuff will definitely go on my own page. So it just really depends. Um, so we'll have to see about it.
Yeah,
And I've already got.
if you get yourself some hardware, you can get a lot of audio software and everything for free. So
Yeah, right. There's a learning curve that goes with that, but I'll get through it. And right now I'm trying to record a book for somebody that's got a book on Amazon. And it's about, because the person's a Christian, and so they wrote a book where they call out fundamentalists before portraying a God that is violent and petty and vengeful and insecure and just awful, right? And they're like, "Hey, look, I believe in a God. I believe in Jesus, and I've got this idea of God that's not awful. Why do you guys prefer an awful version of God?" And even though I don't agree with his religion, I want to help him, and I offered to do this work for him, and I'm still working on it, because, and it's a catch-22, but I think that that's how progress happens the most. When the Quakers decided that Bibles didn't mean to be pro-slavery after all, and so they needed to lead the abolition movement. They were technically wrong. Bibles absolutely did mean to endorse slavery, but it was a beautiful lie, right? Because it's beautiful because we're talking about abolition, right? We're talking about freeing slaves and working toward a society that isn't racist. That's beautiful. But they had to lie to themselves in order to get there, right? They had to convince themselves that Bibles are totally anti slavery just to be able to justify it to other Christians and then have this idea catch on. So that's where the progress happened. Now, if the Quakers would have accidentally outgrew the religion entirely and became atheists or secular humanists or something else, that would have been quite ironic because then they would have lost all potential influence with other Christian groups and with the nation as a whole. And then they would not have been able to lead the abolition movement because people would have been saying, "Okay, great, you're anti-racism and you want to free the slaves. Good for you, but we don't recognize your authority. We don't recognize that you're anybody we should even listen to about social and moral issues because you're not Christians, right?" And it's the same thing. If Jesus back in the old in the first century, no matter if he was real or not, no matter how much of it he really said or didn't, within the context of the stories, if this guy would have went around saying, "Hey, guess what? I figured out I'm an atheist, but we should stop being awful to everybody," they would have said, "Dude, shut up, because you're nobody to us." But because he went around as a Jew saying all this stuff, a lot of people were like, "Well, maybe he's got a point," right? And so it's that kind of a thing. So I think the most progress that gets made toward resolving the problems that are created in society by fundamentalist religions is by helping those religions grow. We love the idea of helping them or deconvert overnight, but it's not practical. It's not realistic. It just doesn't work that way. And so it's much more effective toward creating a progressive society, a progressing society, to influence those religious cultures, to kind of get them to influence each other so that they'll grow faster, so that they'll become better people more quickly. And so that's why I offered to help this one particular guy um, by doing the recordings for his book, because he's calling out, the worst Christians and encouraging them to become better Christians. And I'm actually all for that. So that's where I am about it.
And when you're not doing things verbally, you also enjoy writing.
I do. The problem with my writing, besides the fact that my blogs are too long and sometimes repetitive, is that when you write about controversial issues, whether they're about religious issues directly or just social values that maybe religious people happen to care about, whatever. If people are only reading it in text, they're only reading it in a written form, then they're not hearing the personality behind the words. They're not hearing the attitude. They're not hearing compassion. They're not hearing diplomacy. They're not hearing.
They're not seeing you smile and just, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So, you know, if somebody reads something that I write and they don't know me at all, they've never heard me speak on any issue, then they're going to think that they're hearing anger, vitriol, right? That there's some guy in a keyboard, that there's some guy sitting at his computer swearing and yelling and jumping up and down, and he can't wait to punch somebody in the face. But then when they actually hear me talk about these issues, and they go, "Oh, okay, that's the personality that he's working with, and this is the angle that he's, the energy and the attitude that he's really bringing to this conversation," and it hits them differently than if they just read it. And I think that that's probably the biggest obstacle to my writing that I've had for blogs, is that people automatically just assume if you're calling religions out for their nonsense, that you're angry, right? That you're fuming mad, and that this is vitriol. And I think that when they hear me talk about it, then they realize that's not what this is after all. And that's why I prefer the YouTube as a format.
And we do enjoy hearing you speak. You speak very well, and you've got a great demeanor. And we all have our bad days, and sometimes but I hope things will get smoothed out. But even when you've engaged with people that haven't been maybe as eager to engage in civil discourse. You keep your cool generally, and you do a great job. So I hope you do more, and
Well, I appreciate that.
I hope it doesn't discourage you.
Right. Now, Blessed Be made a point that I banned them from my channel. Let me clarify this because they wouldn't know. I didn't ban Blessed Be He. Somebody else did. Somebody used their wrench and they decided that there wasn't the space for him at that in that scene. Right. And now they didn't ask me. They didn't tell me. They just banned him. But it's difficult with Blessed Be He because I am probably the one person out of all the channels he's gone to where I've actually engaged with it directly. And I can't say, I can't really vouch for anybody else, but that I've seen. So I'll try to have conversations with Blessed Be He about what the words mean that they're saying. Because people in the chat are like, I have no idea what Blessed Be He's even trying to say. Who is the He? What is the way? What are all these words supposed to mean? And so I'll try to find out. It's been difficult because the reason people in my chat streams and my moderators have assumed or concluded that Blessed Be He is trolling is because they can't, and that even I couldn't get them to explain what the words mean that they're saying. They wouldn't make themselves available to explain what the words mean. And so it just sounds to a lot of people like just another religious fundamentalist saying off the wall stuff about a God and the path to his salvation or whatever. And I do think there's something more to it. I don't think that Blessed Be He is being as literal as they think they're being. I don't think that they're intentionally trying to troll anybody. But people in my chat got the impression that he was just trolling and that he wasn't there for a real discussion. And I tried to moderate between them and the people in that community. And I wasn't able to. I wasn't able to facilitate a better conversation. And one of the moderators, and I don't know who, eventually got tired of it and just went ahead and banned Blessed Be He. So just to let them know, I didn't ban anybody from that. I've only ever banned one person from my channel and did eventually unban them, but it wasn't Blessed Be He.
And sometimes the mods are just trying to help out, and we appreciate the mods that help out because, especially you get a lot of things going in the chat and things go by, and and then YouTube is blaming you because some goofy thing is in your chat. So I mean, I've got nailed before by mods too, but I try to smooth things out and explain myself, and then everything's okay. So it's gonna happen, and try not to get too bent. Just get back with the person and explain what happened or whatever, and work it out.
And for the record, I'm not upset with the people that ban people that they feel are being disruptive. I've told my moderators, I'm like, look, just try to be patient. But at some point, if somebody keeps being disruptive, if you feel attacked or if they're saying bad things about you or a demographic that's vulnerable, or if they're just constantly being disruptive to the chat or to the stream to where nobody can even have a conversation because they're constantly interrupting, use your best judgment. If you think they need to be put on timeout or banned, then just do it. So I'm not mad at whoever banned Blessed Be He. It's a catch-22 because I don't like to ban anybody, right? And if somebody has something to say that they feel is relevant and valuable, I want them to come forward and try to articulate it. But if they can't find the words, then at some point they need to understand that the conversation can't go further. If they can't find new words to articulate what it is that they're trying to say, then they need to find something different to say or just stop talking. There's your options. Because if you keep saying the same thing over and over again and people don't know what you're talking about and you won't explain to people what you're talking about, there's not a whole lot of options at that point. And I'm okay with ignoring people that just can't find the words. And not as an offense. Like, I'm not mad at Blessed Be He. If anything, I feel bad for them because they're trying to say something. People aren't understanding what they mean and they're frustrated with it. Everybody's frustrated. But I don't know how to fix that. I tried and I couldn't find a way to. What the best solution to that is, I have no idea. But I didn't take any of it personally.
None of us do, so don't feel bad.
Yeah.
There's what is it? You cannot expect perfection in an imperfect world. So
sure, we just do the best that we can. And I did invite Blessed Be He to come on stream and explain what they mean, but they didn't take advantage of that opportunity. So, Stephanie Helm says, I think you may be mistaken. Blessed Be He is pretty singular and on message. I don't know.
I'm not really that familiar with the conversations, so I would.
Well, it's pretty much the same thing over and
defer.
over. Yeah, it's pretty much. If you scroll up, it's usually just the same thing over and over again.
And just so you know, I've read the Bible. I know what the Bible says. You can keep telling me over and over. It doesn't change anything.
Right.
Sorry.
So they seem to be talking about how there's some kind of an inner fire, and that there is somebody outside of us that has put that fire there or ignited that fire, shown us how to cultivate that fire, and that we're just forgetting how to tap into that power or that maybe the passion or the beauty or something. I'm not sure what fire represents. I'm kind of guessing about what fire represents there, and that somehow we've lost our way. They want to encourage us to recognize that fire and to cultivate that fire and to put it into good use in our life. But I'm not sure what the fire is, and I'm not sure who they think put it there, and I'm not sure why they think I used to know how to do the thing, and I'm not sure how they know that I don't know how to do the thing. Like, does this make sense? Like, I don't know what they mean. And is it a Bible reference? I'm not actually sure. Because I've never seen them mention any particular Bible passage. I just don't know. So I tried to help them. That's all I really can do.
You gotta have the flames and the swords and the armor of God, and then that doesn't do you any good if you don't have the Holy Spirit, because then you won't understand any of it in the first place. And then it's, well, yeah, like you said earlier, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's like, for me, all I hear is, well, you just have to tell yourself it's real. That's all I'm hearing. So if you have something that means anything other than that, let me know. But that's all I'm hearing. So
maybe I just don't know what to make of it. I tried to figure it out, so all I can do is move forward. I try to make my space as inclusive as possible. My rules are pretty simple. I don't care what you do and what you think, as long as the way that you treat people that are here, whether you just be respectful, right? Just be pro-social. If you abuse somebody somewhere else and I find out about it, then we've got a problem in my space, right? Because I can't have people feeling like if person A attacked person B yesterday and I don't know about it, and then person A and person B are both in my stream the next day, and then now person B is not safe, and I don't even know that they're not safe because I don't know what person A said to them yesterday, right? I don't know. But if I see it, or if I find out about it, that changes things considerably, because now they've got to be accountable and make amends and grow as a person, restorative justice, or they've got to go the hell away. Those are our options at that point.
And we can't follow all the discussions. I mean, like you said earlier, you go from channel to channel to channel. We see a lot of the people. We recognize the names. People are on a lot of other channels all over the place. And yeah, I'm sorry if somebody said something to you, but I wasn't there. I don't know. And I don't like to take sides, especially in something I didn't even know happened. So.
Yeah, because it's a project unto itself. So, I mean, it is what it is. Sometimes there's a delay, right? Like Myth Vision. Like, it took Derek a while to not only find out what Richard Price was about, but to like wrap his head around it and to come to terms with the fact that he had to make a hard call, right? And so he went through these stages of development where he didn't know, and then he did, but he didn't believe it, but then he believed it, but he wasn't sure what to do about it, and then he finally made a choice, and then he had to take responsibility for the choice instead. And it's a progression. And I was patient the whole time because we're all on our own journey. He's got to take time to make sense of things, right?
And on the other hand, somebody out there might think it's worthy to talk to Mr. Price and get his side of the story, and you can't hold it against somebody who may want to talk to him to find out what's going on. So
Sure, and honestly, ironically, I'm glad Pine Creek, for example, did, because I wouldn't have known half the stuff that was going on if Pine Creek hadn't interviewed him. And it took it from something arguable and vague to something inarguable and specific for me personally. And I was like, yeah, he crossed the line. There's just no way around it. Until then, it was just rumors that were somewhat vague and that I didn't see any support for until that moment. And then I was like, oh, okay, that's what he's on about. Hell no, right? Like, that was easy. But for me, it took till then. That's just how that works. But as far as people coming into my space, you know, they got to behave. That's it. And I've said this to Jay back when he used to hang out. I'm like, look, I don't care if somebody in my chat's a serial killer in their spare time. Well, I care because I don't want them serial killing. But as long as they can behave pro-socially in my space and don't ask me to hide the bodies, maybe at least being exposed to people.
metaphorically,
Metaphorically,
metaphor.
I said, look,
To
if
be
there's
clear,
any,
everybody.
right, there's a lot of people out there that are horrible, and for various reasons. Now, not all, some of the horrible people would be less horrible if they were having some of their social needs met. If they were having regular exposure to pro-social, rational, level-headed people, then they would start to temper off. They would maybe do something less. Maybe they would be less horrible next week or the week after. It's not my job to be the therapist. My point is that I don't need to know what somebody's been doing in their spare time in order to decide whether or not they belong in my space. The only thing I even have access to know is whether or not they're behaving right in either this space or in associated spaces. And the moment I find out that they're not, well, then they've got there's a reckoning, and they've got to make a new commitment to be cool, depending on how evil they've been. If they've crossed a certain line, then maybe they don't even get a second chance. Um, but if they've only done something arguable, then they've got to make amends for it. Otherwise, they can't be in the space. It's simple, right? But you can't always know. You can't always know, and I don't know. Like, blessed be he, I have no idea how religious they are or they aren't. If everything's a metaphor, I have no idea what they're trying to tell me. No idea at all. And I don't think the reason they were banned, for example, is because they were being bad or because they were being religious. It's because they were being disruptive and people had no idea what they were going on about and they didn't were tired of worrying about it. So sometimes it's arguable. Sometimes there's this kind of murky gray area where do you ban the person or don't you ban the person? And sometimes it's a hard yes or a hard no. It just depends. But with that kind of decision making comes a certain amount of social responsibility that takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of introspection. Sometimes it takes personal research. And these are endeavors that require a certain amount of personal energy goes beyond the amount of personal energy I ever intended to set aside to have a YouTube channel. Catch
Right.
22.
And before I spend the energy, because I will engage with somebody, but before I spend all the energy, if you're just going to call me a demon and doom me to hell, just do that now and
Yeah,
save us all the time.
save us
Because
all the time.
if that's where it's just going to get to, just do it and get it over with.
Right.
Save us all a lot of time. Because if
Save us all the time.
that's it, then okay, that's it. If you want to have a discussion, I'm open to have a discussion. But if it's just going to descend to something like that, then just save us the time. I would appreciate it.
Sure. And I do deal with a lot of bad faith actors too. I've had Brett Keane and JG, for example, over at my channel, and I've been at theirs. And at first, I gave them benefit of the doubt. And people kept warning me, don't give those people the benefit of the doubt. They're just there to burn you. And I foolishly did. And we had conversations, and I thought they went okay, but not great. And then later on, they would misquote me and take everything out of context in order to create these narratives where atheists are evil. And
And when you hear these things about certain people doing this, it always is the same people that do this to numerous people. So
right. And so I've learned a lot of hard lessons. I was pretty naive coming into YouTube as a community project, as this socially networked enterprise. I was incredibly naive about what kind of personalities I would run into and what kind of stunts that I'd get caught up in without even realizing it, and what people would expect of me and what I would need to expect of myself. And when you have a channel that gets caught up in all kinds of controversies with problematic people, who are mixing themselves in and trying to blend in and pass themselves off as reasonable, it can catch you out of nowhere, and then you can say, "Oops, I shouldn't have gave that person my time," right? And then there's consequences for that too. And it's like, uh, my channel was never supposed to get caught up in that crap. Never. I didn't even realize that crap was even out there to get caught up in when I started my channel, and it's just crazy. So again, I don't know what I'm going to do moving forward. Um,
Well,
I,
whatever it is, we'll support you because we all love you, James. So
well, I do appreciate that. I
whatever
really
you
do.
do, we're going to be there checking it out, guarantee.
Awesome. You guys are
And
awesome. I
I
appreciate
and I appreciate you stopping by today. I know you weren't feeling the best today,
it.
but
Mm-mm.
James Apperson, the man, endured and said, "Nope, we're going to do the interview." And
Mm-hmm.
he did, and he made it through. And I appreciate it, James. And I
Made
hope
it
you're
through.
feeling better the rest of the day. And before we go, I'd like to check the chat once more. I see that Melody Joy stopping through. Always good to see you. A pleasure. And Blessed Be, he wants to know, is this a Christian channel? No, this is not a Christian channel. I'm a skeptic. I'm open to discussions on any topic, and I try to be pleasant and unbiased and neutral and listen to what the person has to say. And all I ask in return is to ask some questions.
Right. Yeah. Same here.
And Mr. Duke has to say to James Apperson in Captive Desk, what do you think of my new position that all strains of Christianity are cults? They just have different levels of restriction on dealing with the world. Well, I agree that Christianity threatens you if you don't believe, and that defines a cult.
Mm.
What do you say, James?
Yeah. So, cult being the root of culture, we're talking about a systematic effort to have a pervasive, yet not openly disclosed amount of influence over your cognitive processes via manipulation. Right? They manipulate you with wordplay propaganda. They manipulate you with by toying with your emotions and by playing upon your insecurities, and um, by trying to give parameters about the boundaries in which you're allowed to think and feel and live and relate and express yourself. So there are things even about the larger culture that we sit in, that have elements of that in which I'm aware of and which I'm resistant to. I think it's highly problematic. But when you talk about very organized systems of ideas like Christianity, it becomes a more concentrated, more obvious efforts to wield cult influence over other people's headspace. And so, yeah, I have not yet encountered a version of Christianity that was not at least a little bit guilty of that. Even the more progressive versions do have elements of attempted manipulation on other people's cognition and try to impose restrictions on what it's okay to think and feel and everything else. Now, in a very general sense, I could say that I do the same. I tell people that I don't think it's okay to be a racist, right? I don't think it's okay to be an authoritarian. I don't think it's okay to be a sexist, right? And so we all do this. We all have a list of things that we think is okay to think and things that it's not okay to think. And we express those to other people and trying to, impose some sort of social system that where there are consequences to being sexist or being a racist, etc. So, in a very general sense, this is an enterprise that we're all engaged in. But religions take it to a whole nother level where they presume to speak by a greater authority, the creator of the universe of all things, and they have a very ridiculous list of things that that just don't make any sense except in the context of mind control that really have nothing to do with being a good person, but they still pretend it does, right? Like belief in archaic stories about some human sacrifice in the Iron Age is some kind of moral imperative to believe in it. It's just it's nonsensical. So if there's some version of Christianity out there, or some group that waves a Christian banner that doesn't participate in absurdities in their effort to win some kind of culture war, I haven't run into that group yet. Could they exist? Maybe, sure. I haven't run into them. So I'm just going to say, yeah, I agree with Scott Duke.
We agree with you, Scott. And here's a typical question from Blessed Bay. Have you forgotten the way? Well, according to the Bible, the way is to believe Jesus is the Son of God and he rose from the dead. And I do not believe either one of those claims. So I didn't forget anything. I do not believe it.
Right. So here's what I want to think they mean, and I'm not sure. I want to think that Blessed Be He means to be more fully alive, just to have passion and have focused and have integrity and have a life that's about something, and to harness that passion for empowerment and helping the world. That's what I hope that they mean. But every time I've tried to ask them, they wouldn't tell me what they mean, so I just don't know.
Well, we've got some suggestions in the chat. Adapt and survive. This is the way. Can't argue with that. Keep your jetpack fueled up as soon as they invent jet packets. This is the way. Yeah.
Sure, why not? Right. It can mean almost anything. And so, yes, Colossia 789. That is a very generous interpretation on my behalf. But yeah, I should name it stock account. But I just don't know what else to do with it but be generous, because it costs. And this is one thing that I really want to convey to people: wherever it costs nothing to be generous, be generous. Give people the benefit of the doubt every time it's not risky to do so. I take no risk at all to assume that Blessed Be He means something completely reasonable. No, it does. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. It doesn't cost me anything. So I choose to be as charitable as possible with my interpretations.
Thanks for stopping by, Stephanie. Good to see you.
Yes, very good. In fact, that image of Stephanie out there on the waves doing their competitive sailing, which I think is a really wonderful way to spend some.
You two would have a lot to talk about if we get you near the docks, huh?
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I do have a love of all things nautical.
Don't blindly trust the way that you are on. Yep. And again, I will repeat what we said earlier. We have to critique ourselves in whatever you want to call it, as skeptics, as a community, whatever the word is. We cannot be immune from critiquing ourselves, and we have to be willing to take the critique.
Yeah, we have to question everything and be ready to be questioned at all times.
B.S. Lewis, thank you for stopping by. Good to see you. I wonder if Christians have forgotten the way, or if their metal is weak.
Pragmatic Crystal says the mouth should have 3 gatekeepers. Is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? I like that idea. And my gatekeepers sometimes take the afternoon off, head down to the pub, and I just wish they would stay on the job, as it were. It's one of the reasons why I feel a lot of times where I probably shouldn't have a channel, or I should just have a safer channel where I talk about safer things.
No, BS, I really want to ban Beheat, but that's just not the way. Well, I don't mind if he comments. Anybody can comment. Again, like James said, as long as everything's civil and you're not singling anybody out for any silly reason or anything, there ain't no reason we can't all talk.
I appreciate that, Pragmatic. I do. So
complain about it on James' channel. Like, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
James the big boy, he can take care of himself. And the same thing with anybody else I have on my channel. If you contact him, I put the information in the description. Get a hold of them.
Right. And the offer still is up there, blessed be he. If you want to come on a stream with me and can find your voice, and if you want to talk about what it is that you mean, I'll have you on my stream and we can have a discussion. Just let me know. That doesn't mean I'll
And
agree with you, but I spent over 3 hours talking to the freak here a couple months ago, 3 months ago, and I value every minute that I had a chance to spend talking with him.
BS says it wasn't him, so there you go.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't me. Not me. Not me. Remember Family Circus cartoons? Not
Oh
me.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
me.
I remember those.
Who did
Right.
this? Not me.
Not me. Yeah, we're revealing our age by talking about such things. So yes, I do remember that.
It was a classic. It was it was every so often it would come back too. It was a recurring theme in the cartoon, so it was a classic.
Right, yeah, it was. Classic of an era. And so think before you talk is what I try to follow, says Colossia 789. But the problem on my stream is that I often don't have any script or idea of what I'm going to say next when I start to talk. And that does make it a special challenge to think before I speak, because I usually don't. I haven't really thought before I spoke most of the time I've been on Dave's show today. I just, whatever pops into my head, he asks
Dave
me a
is
question. And I
scripted.
say,
Dave is scripted. I'm scripted.
I'm not scripted. I just, you ask me a thing, and then my head just starts spewing out stuff, and I just hope for the best.
James, you are really good at it. Dave is not. Dave is scripted. So I do have my notes in front of me, and I'm not shy to, and I share my notes with my guests and everything, and I let them know that I have notes. So
sure, I did glance over what you sent
I'm
me.
not claiming to be good on the fly or anything.
So I'm good on the fly, but the problem with that is that by relying on that as a skill set, I am inevitably going to have moments once or twice a year where something that spills out probably shouldn't have got out. But you can't put it back once it happens. So that's the downside to not thinking before I speak. I'm pretty good at it. 99% of the time I get away with it. But it's that 1% that people are going to remember and say, remember that one time, James, where you said a thing you shouldn't have said? And I'm going to be like, yep, I sure do remember that.
That's fake news. That's fake news.
Fake news, man.
It never happened.
Yeah, no, I own it. It is what it is.
Sandal says maybe it is good not to be too hard-headed on things, to make things to go towards better. But am I hard-headed of not being hard-headed? It's tough, I'm hard-headed. I am. I'm hard-headed, and I told James before we started the stream, I can easily just say F you, screw you, and walk away. But
yeah.
I can also sit here and have a conversation with somebody if I just tell myself to do so. So it is possible. And I like to tell people most wars are ended by the diplomats sitting down and talking.
The last war humanity ever has won't be ended that way. We know how that one's going to end. We just don't know when or how. But we know our wars won't be over until there are nobody left to have a discussion. But in the meantime, that is how our other wars end, right? Until then, our wars end by diplomatics sitting down to talk.
Most of the time,
most of the time,
even after all the carnage and all that waste, you're going to sit down and talk anyways. How about we do that first? Say, again, let's save ourselves all the aggravation, time, loss of life, and injuries and everything, and we're going to talk to work it out anyways. So it would be nice if we could just avoid that whole mess in between.
I agree 100%. So,
and Classy is showing off your channel link. That is linked in the description. Appreciate it. And everybody make sure you go and check out James' links too.
So is it Colossia? Is it Colossia? Is it Colossia?
Colossia. I like Colossia because it sounds classy.
Could be.
And look at the trees. Always a pleasure, sir. Good to see you. I just watched you splitting some logs with your new axe. I think
Yeah,
it
I watched that
works
too.
out good for you.
Look at
He's
the
got
trees I'm chopping down.
he's got quite a swing on him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sandal says, common enemy makes people who disagree to work together. Maybe we should start making up imaginary enemies to get people to work together. Maybe not. I've often thought about that. You know, if somebody were able to perpetrate a hoax where aliens were coming to destroy and conquer our planet, I think pretty quickly people would get over the petty differences and start working together. It's just that we don't have the technological ability to trick every powerful nation on Earth into thinking that they have to work together to thwart some sort of enemy invasion. Um, it, you know, I think, was it back in the 50s? Was that when that radio broadcast happened and a bunch of people thought it was real? Um,
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds, yeah. If we could do something like that again and get China and America and everybody else to fall for it, yeah, I think so. They'd be like, you know what? Maybe we should quit being enemies. We should work toward a common goal.
The
But
common cause, you know.
yeah, that would be
And
nice.
yeah, sadly, it often takes a tragedy. And again, can we skip the tragedy part? Right? You know, I mean,
Right.
we know what's going to happen. Something's going to happen, and then we're going to do something. Right?
Right.
That's what's going to happen. So let's skip the bad part. You know, it seems like a no brainer, right?
You would
Skip
think.
the bad part. Okay.
Right.
But you know, sometimes the simple answers are complex within themselves, I guess. So
Yeah. Well, people tend not to be able to see beyond the parameters of their current paradigm. And so this is one of the problems with people in Washington living, in really nice houses with really manicured lawns and really safe neighborhoods, because it gives them a distorted view about the nature and the struggle of the country that they're supposed to represent. Right? Honestly, in my opinion, our politicians should be forced to live in the more troubled neighborhoods. They should be forced to as a condition of being able to be a politician, so that they don't lose touch with the reality of what people are struggling with. And this is a big part of the reason why politicians get so caught up in their own paradigm that they can't really see anybody else's, and they get a skewed and detached sense of what's going on in the world. October 30th, 1938, War of the Worlds, says Pragmatic Crystal.
yeah, a classic. All right, so before we wrap things up here, I wanted to say thank you for everybody joining us in the chat. Always glad to see everybody and appreciate the questions and the comments, and everybody is always welcome. I think we said hello to everybody. So I got adjust myself here. Hang on one second.
Yeah. No, I love those shades.
Okay. All right. Do I got the look?
You've got the look.
Do I got the look?
You
Okay.
do, in my opinion.
All right. So let me get my headphones are squishing it a little bit here. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now, I want to thank everybody again for joining us in the chat. And I want to thank James Apperson, the James Apperson, for joining us today. And if you enjoy discussions like these, like the subscribe and hit a bell so you get notified for future videos. And I'll see you then. And now, as promised, for all of you who stuck around, James is going to take us out. And James, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. So, I was tempted to cheat and play a clip of me singing from last year, because I have days where my voice just hits that range and I'm like, hey, that's not bad. And I have other days where I feel like, don't even try it, man. Don't even try it. Stop while you're ahead. don't go cringe. Never go full cringe. And so I just don't know, right? My dad, as you know, he sang Elvis for many years. And his favorite songs were actually more religious. Um, the the Man from Galilee was probably his favorite Elvis song, which is ironically one of Elvis's least known songs, I think. And it was interesting because there was philosophical insights to that song, despite being religious, that I think have some merit if you like strip away the religious components. And so I normally don't sing, not even in the shower. And I think that surprises some people. Um, so earlier today, when you mentioned you were going to see if maybe I'd want to sing a bar or two, I tried to remember some songs to some the words to some Elvis songs. I couldn't remember the words. Like, oh my gosh, that's how long it's been. So I'm just trying to think. Like, admittedly, my throat is swollen and sore today. But I'm trying to think if I can remember some of the words to one of the songs he used to sing. Um, let me think. The Teddy Bear song is one that he liked a lot. And I know I'm not going to do it justice. I'm going to embarrass myself for time immemorial to even try it today. Um, do I want to stretch that far? Um, I just don't think I can. I just don't. My throat doesn't feel right for it. Let me look and see what other song I could find. Um, well, let me cheat. Let me cheat and play the song. Let me play the recorded one that I did. Let me just do that, and then go out on that. I just can't. I just can't make my voice do it today. I don't think. So, can I cheat? Do you want me to not cheat?
You can cheat.
I think I'm just gonna cheat. I'm just gonna play it.
We don't want to push. We don't want to push the throat today if it's not
Yeah,
in the
my throat just does not feel right for it today. I'm gonna do a share screen. 1 second. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this up. So I don't necessarily think it sounds great or bad. It's somewhere in the middle of the two, but I'm okay with it, right? It's just, hold on 1 second. Let me pull it up. I sent it to myself earlier, so I would have it when I need to go find it. That was it. Yep. So okay, I'm gonna share the screen. You got it. There we go. So let me come back over here real quick. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfill. For my darling, I love you, and I always will. So that's me cheating by playing something I'd already recorded, but it's a thing. It's whatever. I'm not embarrassed about it. I'm not proud of it either. It's somewhere in the middle. So I think if I practiced a lot, then I could get really good at it. I just don't even know why I don't. I think it's like blessed be he says, I've lost the fire, I've lost the way, and I've forgotten how. So I have to find that, rekindle that fire within me somehow, so that I start feeling like I even want to sing again. So hopefully I can get there.
All right. Well, I'll help you out. Ready? We're gonna say thank you very much. Okay, and we're gonna wrap
Sounds
it up.
good.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Dave.